Hello and welcome to my article facilitation on priming and its effect on your unconscious or implicit memory. First off, let's talk about the different types of memory we have. We have implicit memory and explicit memory. Explicit memory is memory that you consciously can recall. So let's say you study for a test and you have to think hard and you remember a formula. That is your explicit memory. Or doing a project, you recall consciously doing a project, how to hammer a nail in and things like that. Now, these explicit memories can also tie to, hey, what did I eat today and stuff like that. And they can be relatively short term because it's a conscious short term memory idea that we hold within our minds to help us get through the day, but we don't necessarily need to remember it. Now, implicit memory is unconscious compared to the conscious. So, when you have an implicit memory, you will not remember it consciously. It'll kind of just surface. So, let's say you're working on a math assignment and all of us you can't do it, and all of a sudden your hand just starts going and you're able to do the problem and it is correct, but you have no clue how it got there. That is your implicit memory, your unconscious memory at work. And these are what the study dealt with. Is this kind of memory more long term, even though we don't remember actually having that memory? Now, we do have something called memory decay, and that is something that the study was looking at, is how much does the unconscious memory decay, and is there a way to slow down or even prevent our memory from decaying? Because, like I said before, your conscious memory does store short-term memories like, oh, I'm eating this, this, and this today, but 2 days later, you don't even remember what you ate or the fact that you did your homework. What the study wanted to look at was, does priming help you remember things in your unconscious memory? And what priming is, it is the act of working with stimuli to influence a response at a later time. A great example for a conscious memory is the Pavlov's dogs. However, for the unconscious memory, it's a little bit fuzzier on how that works and if it works. I did forget to mention that it's priming the implicit memory for long-term memory retention. What happens is there's different types of stimuli that can be used. The first one is procedural stimuli. Procedural stimuli are stimuli that can change over time. So an example would be, let's say you met somebody in high school and they're like, hey, remember my face for the 25-year class reunion? And you come back and they're going to be like, hey, do you remember me? Their face could have changed. They could have been in an accident, which totally changed their appearance, and you might not know who they are. And that was the problem with many studies that have been done before, is they use this concept to try and see if they could use it as a priming mechanism. In Mitchell's experiment, he used something called conceptual stimuli that is not going to change over time. For example, black and white photos, which are specific to the study. And black and white photos, as long as they're kept in good condition, will not change. And as it turns out in the study, if you show somebody a black and white photo and then you cut it up, and they could put it back together. It is stimuli that does not change over time. It's all about the concept or the idea of the stimuli. Going along with this is how much priming is needed for a idea or concept to be imprinted in your implicit memory for it to be able to be recalled. And in the experiment, they only did 1 to 3 seconds with each piece of stimuli, and they were exposed 1 to maybe 3 times. And what was surprising is how much information was retained. What was found was, with the control group, priming helped them identify the stimuli which had been cut up into fragments at a relatively medium rate, a little over 50%. And the surprising part was the people that were primed 17 years earlier still retained about the same amount of information as the others in the control group. But the surprising part was is some of them forgot they had participated in the study, but were still able to identify the fragments at the same rate as those who remembered they were in the experiment or in the control group. Another study that was conducted that is an expansion on this experiment was conducted and published in 2018, and it also looked at long-term memory, but only over 12 years. But the really cool part about this was is it used the idea of familiarity with the subject matter as a measurement for how people remember things in their implicit memory. What the study found was the fact that the number of times that somebody sees something makes them more familiar with it, which makes them have a higher rate of identification of the stimuli. And that is very important for the long term memory. And this is very helpful in education, knowing this idea. Priming students to be able to remember things in their unconscious memory could help them retrieve that information later down the road. For example, for my future classroom, I'm studying to be a high school chemistry teacher. And one of the things that I could do is use something to prime students for chemical formulas that are going to change and have some way of stimulating that implicit memory so that they can pull out the information they need, maybe on a test, or maybe they're in a lab and it helps them remember something. An example of this would be some students take one science class their freshman year, then they might, let's just say, have not have to take one until college because they go to college. And implicit priming could help them retain the information they need to at least get started in the class and help them later on, or maybe it's a skill they need in their life and they just unconsciously remember it. And more research needs to be done into this to see the effect on learning. Now, a question I have is now that we're on the last slide, if you have any questions that you need to be asked in the discussion, please do. But do you remember this bird? If you do, I was sort of running a little bit of an experiment of my own. I put the bird on one of the slides to see if I could prime you guys to remember it later on. And if you do, please let me know in the discussion. But a couple questions for you to end this is, have you ever had a time where you subconsciously were able to remember a procedure or skill you had you not used in a long time? And were you able to complete the task that it involved? And what other types of exercises do you think might help prime the implicit memory in your classroom?